I'm in the Peace Marla Garden once again, this time with Olivia. Olivia is a pagan priestess, originally from Essex, but living in Wales for the last 6 years. Olivia, you came here to university. I know you're a pagan priestess and Egyptologist. Olivia, tell me something about your faith.
I have a very universalist belief, so I believe in the reality of all things, and that there's truth to be found in all of them. Specifically though, obviously I identify as a pagan, and so my faith is focused on seeing nature and the earth as divinity manifest. That's at the core of my belief. So everything that gives me true spiritual gratification will be related to nature and just being a part of that world and recognising that I'm not separate from that either. It's about the interconnectedness, and I think that helps with the universalist concept of God as well, because if we're all nature, you know, everything is connected in that way. So that's the core, and then practically it might manifest in lots of different ways as well. I'm a priestess of the goddess, so I see God manifests as the divine feminine, not solely feminine, but that's how I prefer to view her. So those are the main two things, but I'm very fluid. You know, if God wants to come to me in a different way entirely, I'm open to that. Things change, and I'm not strict on ways of doing things.
How do you function as a priestess? How does that manifest itself?
I do lots of ceremonies, particularly for the festivals when there's something wonderful to celebrate, usually related to the natural year again. So ceremonies, but also regular prayers for myself and for other people. Every morning there's a kind of thank you for my life prayer, and I consider my work with Peace Marla as well to be a part of that sacred service. You know, when I'm sat in front of a computer and I might not be in high robes or anything like that, spreading the message of peace and humanity and interconnectedness of everybody is a part of that sacred service. So it doesn't have to be formal ceremonies or ritual or anything like that. It can be in the mundane actions too, and they're just as important.
Yeah. Do you have like congregations or gatherings regularly, or at specific times of the year?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, I follow the Wheel of the Year. So that's like a neo-pagan concept based on much older ideas, but it's definitely a neo-pagan vision of 8 seasons or 8 festivals in the year based on the sun cycle and the agricultural year. So we often as we can, because we're busy people, meet up together to celebrate them. There are additional things as well that we might just want to do. For example, the beginning of August, there's Goddess Conference that happens in Glastonbury, which is an amazing experience. So we come together then as well. It really varies whether we come together as a massive group or a group of 12 people or a group of 3 or 2. You know, it really varies. You know, there's a lot of eclectic things going on within pagan traditions, so it's really fluid. Yeah.
So would you say that you don't really identify as a particular singular faith, rather that pagans of all kinds are in communion with each other in some way? Would that be fair to say?
I think that's probably the ideal, but in reality it doesn't always work out like that. There are some pagans who are very clear on what they believe, typically reconstructionists, so people who are really trying to reconstruct the ancient religions. That's what they're passionate about and what they really believe they need to do. Then there's many of us who just want to find out what there is out there, and there's many eclectic pagans, and I would consider myself amongst that, especially if I want to be a priestess of the goddess. Well, there's goddesses worldwide, and so I find it would be too limiting for me to be priestess of one particular thing only. And if I was, then I wouldn't be able to reach many people if I did that. So yeah, I prefer to not keep myself in one box and just to embrace that diversity as an umbrella term. Pagan might seem a little bit broad for some people and unclear about what that means, and I don't mind that at all.
Could you say what pagan means?
I would define it as a modern definition, to be an umbrella term for anyone who follows a non-Abrahamic faith or spiritual lifestyle, specifically related to following or seeing the earth and nature as divine, and perhaps with reference to ancient religions as well. That's the most concise way that I can see it, but if you ever ask a pagan, like a group of pagans, the same question, you'll get hundreds of answers. So, but that's why it can be challenging for people to really pin down, is paganism a religion or a faith? You know, It's paganisms. There's loads of different religions under that. But there tends to be a fellowship and community where a lot of us are happy to just have pagan, because we recognise how diverse it really is.
Yeah. Of course, there's been a lot of misconception and kind of dark painting of paganism through some of the Christian era and through aspects of the way the church has been done. Can you say something about that?
Well, I think it's really sad, and it's not just pagans who've suffered from that, and it's people within the church that have also suffered from patriarchal perspectives of the way life should be run, and it's all about control. That's not what Christianity is about. But that's been used as the excuse, just like pagans have been used as a scapegoat themselves. So I think we need empathy with each other, to understand that, you know, we can't just blame the Christians for discriminating against us. You know, the Christians were just suffering as well. There are plenty of Christian women who were burnt and hung and drowned as witches. They were Christians, so they were equally persecuted against. Terribly sad, and still goes on. But I think there's a rise in paganism, witchcraft, goddess spirituality these days, because at least in this culture, we're safe to say what we are. I think we've always had people who believe in different things, but living in contemporary Britain, I'm pretty safe. I might get some nasty words thrown at me, but I have a right to question those words, whereas in some other cultures still today, I don't.
Yeah. Of course, the early Celtic Church came about very much in communion, really, with the indigenous faiths of this land and other Celtic lands, and there is some evidence that the Druids were the first Christian priests in Wales. Is there a re-interest, do you think, emerging in this time in connections that go before the kind of prejudice is built up in the Middle Ages?
I think today people are looking for an alternative, certainly, and we idolise the past as being a romantic time where everybody was communing with nature, and it was actually a pretty harsh time to live. But certainly there is something really significant with returning to our roots and looking back. And I think nature has got a huge part to do with that. Living in crisis now, what we're doing to our planet, more and more people are starting to care. Not enough, but more and more are. And I think that's definitely related to people having a rediscovery of the old ways, whether it's pagan or just their old heritage and going back in time to a simpler time. And the natural world has a big part to play in that, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's a heavy motivation why a lot of people are looking for alternatives.
There's a lot of talk, of course, about the earth being damaged, and is that part of your concern?
Certainly. I would find it hypocritical if I didn't pay attention or care. For me, God, Goddess, Divine, is in everything. It's everything on earth and then beyond earth, everything in creation. Now, if I'm seeing divinity in everything, then I can't just drop my rubbish and pollute the ocean. Of course, I'm not perfect. I'm part of this society, and it's how I've been raised. It's hard now. But I have a responsibility if I'm going to be holding that belief and teaching others about that belief that nature is divine, then I have a responsibility to practice what I preach and to really look after her. And that extends to all creatures and people too. Recognizing the divine in everyone is equally important. Looking after the earth is really related to looking after people and looking after animals. It's all connected, and we have a huge responsibility, and we have no excuse now because we know what we're doing. Like in the past, maybe we didn't quite understand the impact that we had on the earth, but we do now. However, some people still deny things like global warming somehow. But yeah, there's no excuse. And so as a pagan priestess, I'll do anything that I can and continue to be responsible, and also hold my hands up when I'm not perfect as well, and try and find ways of growing and developing that within myself too.
How long have you been priestess?
Many lifetimes. But I think I was 23, no, longer than that, 21, I think it was, that I started my proper path of becoming a priestess in this lifetime. I dedicated within the Fellowship of Isis, which is one very open, inclusive organisation that basically recognises the divine feminine wherever. So all religions, all cultures, all people are welcome within the organisation, so long as they recognise that divinity has a female face too. So I got involved with that, and it was very fluid, so I could do that quite young. It was free. I took up a little bit of training with that. And then I'm currently on a priestess training course that finishes in September, where I will rededicate as a priestess, but in a different tradition.
In what tradition?
That one will be the Glastonbury goddess tradition. The tradition of Avalon.
Yeah.
And that's just a different way of doing things, but again, with the feminine face of God.
So will that be like ordination?
Yeah. But this is like with the Fellowship of Isis, there was a ceremony where somebody conferred priestesshood upon me, but the training was given to me by Goddess herself, rather than being taught by people. In the Glastonbury goddess tradition, I'm being taught by other priestesses, but then I self-dedicate at the end, so nobody confers it upon me. I state my vow to Goddess, and I claim that I am now priestess.
Nice.
So there's two different ways of doing it, but it's fascinating.
Is there such thing as a male priest within that as well?
Yeah, certainly. In both traditions, men are equal with women. That's the point, is that we are equal. So in my current, we call it a spiral, my current sisterhood, there is a brother with us as well, which I find very important, and I wish there were more.
I see. Yeah. So you talked about the possibility of a male side to the divine, though you prefer to relate through and to the female goddess. Are you speaking in metaphorical ways about the divine, about God, or are you speaking in literal terms?
I'm speaking in human language. Obviously, God is something far beyond that. And in English, we separate language with masculine and feminine. So I can either say he, or I can either say she, or I can try to endeavour to say they, but it doesn't quite come across in the same way. Really, I think that divinity is all genders and none. Divinity is human and animal and tree and everything. So it's kind of, it doesn't make quite sense to pick just to see her as a female form. But that's the face that I'm giving her, so that I can relate to her as a human. And I prefer to relate to her as a she. I don't mind he at all, it doesn't bother me. But I prefer she as an individual, because I think it's important for us to recognise that it's not actually he. To just reclaim that there is more to it than that. So with that is the empowerment of women, giving women back their divinity, where in the past it's been that, in the past they were barely even humans with souls. So to see she as divine is really significant and powerful. And also, I think to a certain degree, as a female myself, that feels powerful to me, to finally look at God and see her in my image. That personally helps me. But it's not necessary, and I like to see her in all different forms and all different genders. I think it's important to recognise that she's not just a human woman, because that might badly affect men's connection to goddess too, And I've spoken to lots of goddess-loving men, and they don't see any problem with seeing her as a she, and they can still see her within them. I think it's just a use of language and being able to understand. And I love the metaphor of Mother Earth and the divinity that gives birth to creation. I really love that imagery. But at the same time, if we're going to use that imagery, she needs to be impregnated somehow. So it's both. It's the duality and the mixing of all genders and none. It's really important to me. So
the way that you are thinking and speaking is non-dualistic, I suppose, which because of interfaith dialogue is a way of using language that perhaps has been learned from Zen Buddhism, but is used by people of different faiths now, including Christians. That things are not just one thing or the other. So is this a time in which the barriers between faiths are coming down, do you think?
I severely hope so. And from what I'm seeing, yes. In the ancient world, many faiths didn't really have a problem with, they would come into a new country and they'd see the gods there, and they would not be offended by that. They'd see that there's more than just what they might believe. Or like the Romans, they saw their own gods in the other manifestations of that culture. And then obviously there was that period of intolerance where that was no longer okay. So now certainly there's more dialogue, we live in an international human community now, where whether we like it or not, we're all together. And the only way that's going to work is if we actually talk to each other and find out these different ideas and accept that there is more to it than just the way we thought it was, and that we can be mistaken. I think we need to humble ourselves. For a long time we've thought that we knew exactly what was going on, and we've been proved otherwise. And I've been to many different religious ceremonies and places of worship and spoken to many different people. And each person really believes that they are talking to God or connecting in some way. They feel God, they know God in their religious tradition. So how can I say that my one is right and they're just making it up? It doesn't make sense to me. So the treasure is that they found a truth there, and that we can all be a part of that there's something bigger going on, and that God is trying to communicate with all of us, understanding our human nature, and that actually we all come from different places. We're going to understand things differently. And if God wants to be in touch with us, we need to be able to see it in the way that actually makes sense for us. Trying to teach one religious doctrine to a culture that is completely different from our own, they may never be able to access God if you're insisting upon that one way. And I think more and more people are seeing that. And that's partly why a lot of people are drawn to paganism. Because paganism emphasizes no boundaries, no borders. Pagan can come and go into different practices and see different things. There's no walls there. It's about personal spiritual autonomy, and that it's between you and divinity, and nobody else can tell you what to do. And that's really liberating for lots of people. And then opens the door to them finding other spiritual paths as well, like that are not classified as pagan too.
Well, we're sitting here, as I said at the beginning of the interview, in the Peace Mala garden, and you work with Peace Mala, which is an interfaith, of course, organisation promoting interfaith dialogue. And this interview will be on the Church in Wales interfaith website page as well. So what is the role of interfaith dialogue now? How can it help?
The international community, you mean?
Yeah. Well, just the concept of faith, people of faith speaking to each other with integrity, compassion for each other, with empathy, and just recognizing the authenticity of the other, I suppose. It's obviously something that you were drawn to, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here now, but
it just seems obvious. It seems adult. It seems human. Why would we not want to just get along and learn about each other? And I just don't understand why we need to be aggressive and demand that we follow one way. And so it just seems obvious that we want an interfaith dialogue. We want to know about people and talk to everyone. So when I first ever discovered Peace Mala, it was at an interfaith fair when I was at university. And I was so excited because this was exactly what we needed. This is exactly what I wanted. And seeing that earth religions were included was really symbolic, because it showed that everybody is accepted. You know, if you say we're an interfaith charity and we support the 5 big religions, then that's not, that's except these ones. That doesn't mean interfaith. That doesn't mean equality in the message. Whereas Peace Mala actually does. And it's fought for that right to recognise everybody as equals. And that really moved me, that nobody got left out. And so that extends beyond religion. Religion is really important because it's obviously world over, and it's caused a lot of trouble and brought a lot of bliss as well. It's very strong in lots of people's hearts, and is a big instigator for action. But with this interfaith dialogue, it goes much deeper than just religion. I mean, religion goes deep into lots of aspects of life anyway, but it's about recognising us as human. So even if we don't have a religion, it's inclusive of all gender and all sexual orientation, all appearances and cultures. For me, Peace Mala represents that too. It's inclusive of everyone, and that we're all a part of this human world. And there's no exception. And I think that most religious people believe in the golden rule, which is what Peace Mala, advocates. And sometimes we forget that somehow. In a lot of religious actions we've seen in the world, we forget this golden rule of treating others how we want to be treated. It's so basic. It should be so easy. Apparently it's not. And maybe I don't get it right every time either.
Of course, politics and religion have been intertwined, and the powerful take the religion of the time to themselves. What about Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ? Does Jesus have any meaning to you?
Yes. He's not a name that I evoke in my spiritual life, but I think what he represents is exactly what was needed, and somehow it got lost, which I find devastatingly sad, because it's caused a lot of trouble. And it's not just Jesus and his name, it's all other things. It's happening to Muhammad as well. And then many other pagan characters that have also had wars and sacrifices made to them. Yeah, we do that, and we always have. But the message of Jesus, I thought, was love each other and treat each other well, love your neighbour, and find God. I mean, I'm not familiar with deep Christian theology. I have read the whole Bible somehow, but I know that was an important part of it. And so, how crusades and even jihad, how that can happen is a contradiction. Especially when people go forth and say it's in Jesus' name. How offensive. And I find that offensive. I take no offence to Christianity, because it's not Christianity that's the problem, it's the politics and the people who have used it and abused it. So when I look at Christianity and Jesus, I see the truth there, I see the beauty, and how there's no separation. I'd happily go to a church and pray. I've gone to the mosque and bowed my head to Allah. There's no separation for me, but it's the people and how people have been raised and what they've been told and lied about, and the political games that are at play that manipulate and make stuff bad. It's not just religion, it happens with lots of different things. And I don't know what the solution to that is, apart from trying to keep up this interfaith dialogue. But that seems obvious to me, and it doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
Why?
Thank you, Olivia. Would you say a prayer now in the style and language that you choose?
Say a version of the Lady's Prayer. Lady, awaken your spirit in us, so that we may know your ways and your radiance. Lady, open and expand our vision, so that we may see truth. Lady, be in our breath, our voice, and all our actions in service to you today. Lady, fill our hearts with your love, so that we may recognize the humanity and equality of one another. Lady, heal our dis-ease, so that we may trust in you and in each other. Lady, heal our sacred source, our sexuality, our creative core, so that we may respect our bodies and the bodies of others. And Lady, ground us in your love, so that we may always walk on this earth with reverence and respect. Blessed be.
Diolch yn fawr. Tangnefedd. All blessings to you.